Greetings and happy Saturday and happy Easter weekend for those who celebrate. And welcome to our Saturday free show episode of This is Revolution. I'm your current host, Pascal Robert. Our captain of the ship, Jason Miles, is with his son in the Bay having some family quality time. So it's going to be me and a couple of other of the Saturday crew. We're going to have our main man here on the boards, Djene Bajalan. He puts up Mark.
Oi, bruv. Okay, there he is.
Says Djene. And of course, we got back our good friend in Virginia, formerly of Maine, Marcus of the Left Flank Bets.
What's up? What's going on, gentlemen?
Hey, it's going well. So I was just communicating with our guest who will be joining us for the second hour.
Oh, okay. He's coming for the second hour?
He's coming for the second hour, yeah.
Okay, very good. So one of the things that we wanted to chat about before we go into the second hour was the fracas controversy, contretemps, if you will, about Chris Smalls going on Fox News with Tucker Carlson. What it means, what it doesn't mean, and then how it's being responded to. Who wants to summarize the event? Marcus.
I think before getting into even going on Fox News, and we've talked about this before of Chris Smalls leading and organizing the effort for the first, to be get an Amazon union for the first time. Thousands of workers, pretty big victory for, the unionization effort going across the United States. He's been hitting all the shows, I've seen him in a lot of independent left media, stuff like that. But then also mainstream media has taken into notice, which has been great. CNN, MSNBC, and then you get to Fox News, and he was on Tucker Carlson, who led Chris into the segment with an attack on AOC. Chris, I think, did a great job of deflecting, and then just continuing to talk about the overall effort. What comes after that is a dust up, and largely from, I think, a tactic that Tucker Carlson uses, right, where they just takes one photo and I'm going to now say this narrative happened in this photo and this was bad, but also not surprising because I think in some of the ways when Amazon themselves, the officials themselves, said we want to make Chris Smalls the face of it, they were thinking in a certain way. And I think there's a lot of other even left, quote unquote, or liberal commentators that fall into that same pattern of behavior because, he comes with a do-rag, got fronts, whatever.
Well, we're going to hit that. We're going to hit that. Okay,
yeah.
So basically what you're saying is that there's been a lot of media accolades to Chris Smalls for being able to organize a union around the Staten Island location after his subsequently being terminated by Amazon, and they thought they were going to use him as the poster child for a failed union project in their company spaces, and he was basically able to flip that on them and create a union in one of their offices in Staten Island. Correct?
Yep.
And what is happening now is that he's basically become the new face, the new heroic face of the labor movement in this period where people believe that there is a labor resurgency. We heard about the discussions of Striketober. People were like, "Oh, there's a lot of striking going on." We've been hearing this discussion. I've seen articles that actually question that. One of them from Doug Henwood, which was in Jacobin, where he says, based on the actual numbers, there's no tangible evidence that there's been an increase in actual labor activity or union activity. As a matter of fact, his argument is that it's still flat. I asked him on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, does he still stand by that? He had no response to deny or change his position on those numbers. But all I can say is that whether or not the tangible actual activism in union and labor spaces is up or down, the atmospherics of the reality make it seem like we're in a union upsurge. And I think that that's a material reality. Perception can have a realpolitik effect. And I think we should definitely take advantage of that as well. But at the same time, the question becomes, what exactly is the role of the liberal establishment vis-a-vis this current moment? Because the first person who kind of wanted to appropriate this and I know I'm not going to say AOC, was Joe Biden. Joe Biden goes and gets on in some kind of press conference, and he was like, "Unions are back. Amazon, we're coming for you."
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I think you're totally right. Everybody's trying to get on the glory train for this. I think it's very important because I think a lot of us had our eyes on the activities of the established unions and their efforts to organize people. But this was a different kettle of fish. This was a grassroots, non-institutional attempt to organize. And I think maybe Amazon took its eyes off the prize because they didn't see it as a serious threat. So I think it's been a big success. And I think there's a lot of people who have Trump derangement lib brain. So when they saw Chris Smalls go on Tucker, they just lost their mind because they completely can't control their emotional reaction to Tucker Carlson, even though I think he did exceptionally well on Tucker Carlson. And then I also think there are people who are cynically using his appearance on Tucker Carlson in an effort to demonize and demoralize him from the so-called left. That is, there are certain Twitter accounts, there are certain people in social media who are looking on this in a way, in a very condescending way, to say that this guy is not doing activism TM, in the appropriate way. He's not following our ideological discipline. He's going on shows that we don't like. And look, I'm not against people going on Tucker Carlson. I'm more interested in how you perform on Tucker Carlson. But if you go on Tucker Carlson and just act like a total cuck to Tucker Carlson, well, then I'm not impressed. But what Chris Smalls did, Tucker Carlson had an agenda, and he shut down that agenda pretty quickly and put forward his position to an audience that perhaps would not listen to this, wouldn't have heard this particular opinion. So I think he did very well. And I think there are some people out there who are cynically using this appearance in order to delegitimize his position, because we know the fear of fascism, woke identity politics is very often deployed by the left wing of the establishment in order to shut down radicalism. And we know that very well.
And I want to hit back on something like Pascal had mentioned, is the overall unionization effort and whether like those numbers are, up, down, flat, whatever. I think one thing that's important to understand of, coming off of like what the Great Resignation, the amount of people who have left their jobs, the past few years of COVID, and I don't have these numbers, these, and you'd have to like literally look back on counting starting like yesterday as far as, getting an accurate count. But I think that's something that like would have to be understood, right? In that there are just a lot of people who left the workforce. There's also a lot of people who just died because of illness. Like we've got extra deaths going out, like way more than what the COVID numbers are. So with that understanding of even the numbers, and like I'm happy that Pascal says like that at a point too, that perception can influence reality. And the fact of the matter is that there still has to be the contract, negotiations to go on, but they're potentially going to be thousands of more, unionized workers within an Amazon in New York, and then going on and on and on. Hopefully, Bessemer, and then and that's what that's what I'm hoping that is the catalyst of like Chris Smalls actually going on Tucker Carlson, is people hearing the message, not from the de-union or the anti-unionization effort. I'm sorry, from Amazon, and even the fact that Tucker Carlson is giving this a friendly face is going to be an important point. No one thing is ever going to change anybody's mind, but having a series of points in their life where they're getting a message that may be different than the normal unions are bad and they just take your part of your paycheck, that's going to be beneficial in the long run. And yeah, there's a bunch of people online who had to just do some hot take bullshit. And
well, I think and I don't know if you would agree with this, Pascal and Marcus, but I think there is an effort by certain elements in the media establishment to turn the story of Chris Smalls and the unionization efforts at Amazon into a media story. Perhaps on some level, it is a cynical attempt to undermine labor organizing, but I would probably suggest the actual motivation of most of these people who are attempting to turn this into a media story, whether it's complaining about him going on Tucker Carlson, whether it's trying to emphasize the conflict he has had with certain members of Congress, or even sort of gin up that kind of conflict. I think there is a impetus and perhaps a, let's say, incentive for certain figures to try and convert this story into a media story that will drive viewership and will drive engagement, because these kind of conflicts do drive engagement. People like this kind of drama, especially when it involves. I don't know if in America you have the tradition of pantomime, but whereas you have the pantomime bad guys, which is like a caricatured bad guy where everybody in
The
the
heel.
audience boos, everybody cheers, and it becomes like a kind of a childlike performance to drive engagement. And so I think, we can talk about deeper conspiracies, perhaps to delegitimize labor organizing from the, let's just say, wokey woke anti-fascist perspective. But perhaps there's just a simpler explanation, is that people want to make the story about the media, people want to make the story about themselves, and people want to drive engagement by basically stealing the thunder of what is quite an important development.
Do you think do you think that the way in which this is playing out has a correlation to the class projection that Chris Smalls gives off? In other words, if this guy was an MBA from Harvard who chose to go work in class, who wore, $1,000 suits, but had a blue collar aesthetic and did this, would we be seeing this particular type of machination around his appearances on media? Or is this about the fact that basically we have a working class black guy who's not ashamed of his urban aesthetic and proudly manifests it? And because of that, there's a racialization in the way people are perceiving him and trying to undermine his efficacy, intellectually or otherwise, or expect it not to be efficacious for those same reasons.
I think you got the difference has already been laid out when you talk about the unionization effort in Bessemer, which I support. I think I'm hoping that the workers can get through and a win, but that was a very much a union, an already established union trying to top down and say, hey, we already know what's good. They very much talked Chris Smalls out of doing direct organizing with the workers like he was doing in New York, and it's a little bit tougher of a challenge, Um, so yeah, that there is already that type of representation laid bare, and I think that's part of the thing too, is that not only does there need to be a unionization effort, people starting and joining unions, but within the established unions, there needs to be a restructuring in order to make these things more democratic. You're already seeing it in the auto workers union, of them being able to directly vote. So I think there's a lot of different elements to it, but at the end of the day, yes, people need to trust in the people that they're, giving up authority to. And Chris Smalls worked there. He was someone that they knew. And it doesn't necessarily, I would say, yeah, the person from Harvard with the MBA and coming in nice suits, could that person effectively organize that warehouse? Yes, only if they had worked their ass off for years in that warehouse with the rest of the workers, got fired by putting themselves on the line, got arrested by trying to organize those workers. If they do all of the same things, because that's what's really important, is being with the people and actually working for them. But yeah, you can't have some top down, I know better than you because I got a degree. That's just not going to work when it comes to working class people.
What do you think, Djene?
I mean, I think there's. I mean, you talk about this a lot, Pascal, about the NGO foundation world,
Yep.
and I think there is a perception that there's an appropriate way to be an activist within the orbit of the Democratic Party, and to a certain degree that relates to established trade unions in the United States as well, which have historically been part of the Democratic Party coalition. And I just think Chris Smalls is an outsider, and there's going to be a lot of different people who are going to try and appropriate them, and there are going to be people out there who are going to try and undermine him. I mean, it really is one of the things that I found shocking was the attack on him by members of Media Matters, for example. We know Media Matters; they're a
Liberal
NGO. I believe they're quite close to the Clintons, and their main thing is that they just watch right-wing media and then clip particularly juicy, offensive bits in order to whip up Democratic Party base hysteria about the rise of fascism. And it was quite striking that those people, that individual associated with Media Matters, attacked Chris Smalls for going on Tucker Carlson, for legitimizing Tucker Carlson, and it really shows the like complete disconnect between the Democratic Party complex, let's say, not necessarily the formal apparatus of
flank of capital. The
liberal flank of capital does not like labor unions, really. It likes them when they're loyal and they do what they can mobilize people to support the Democratic Party, but it doesn't really like them. There was a couple of weeks ago, maybe even last week, a former Obama administration member who was on Twitter saying that he didn't like labor unions because they were a sign of the government. They were sort of basically trying to get things done that the government should be doing, right? Because these people believe that they might believe in some of the same inverted commas progressive agenda to a certain degree, but it matters to them not only what that agenda is, but how it is executed and controlled. And they want to execute it and control things in a top-down manner. And labor organizing is an unknown quantity, because where does it end, right? It is outside of their power to control entirely. So, I see there is a certain snobbishness, perhaps. There is a class issue, but I think fundamentally the problem that some in the liberal establishment have towards this is that this is something that's taking place outside of the NGO established labor union hierarchy, and it is somewhat sort of uncontrollable. It's an unknown quantity.
And that's
so. Go ahead, Marcus. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think that's like part of the what's exceptionally special about what Chris and the other organizers are able to do is create a new union, which it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but I think it's probably going to be largely beneficial, and a whole lot more say understanding to like what's happening on the ground with workers. But yeah, like you're saying, it's like you can't control something that's going to be built anew, and hopefully in the best interest of the actual workers, because it's them, like Chris and the rest of the people like that are building out the leadership structure are people who were either fired from the warehouse or still working there. So yeah, and that's not something that the ACLU has any oversight over right now.
Well, here's a question I like to pose. What we're saying here is that basically the liberal flank of capital, the liberal establishment, is circumspect because Chris Smalls is basically being a little bit too much of a loose cannon and independent in how he exactly kind of handles himself, media-wise and message-wise. And he's clearly probably not going to lean on them for guidance in this area because his initial media appearances were on really kind of small, definitely within our sphere, left sources. He was on our show here with Jason over a year ago, right? So he comes out of left media spaces. He definitely has some connection to left personalities, and he's not in the constellation of the liberal DNC kind of power structure. So does that mean that there's actually more value for them in the overall chess game of the corporate DNC trying to weaken the Sanders kind of progressive faction? Is there actual a play for them to work actively to delegitimize the Chris Smalls Amazon union phenomenon? Or do you think Biden's telegraph on media shows that they're more desirous of appropriating it? What are your thoughts?
I mean, that's and this. I don't know if Biden can, because there's nothing that the administration is going to do to even slightly touch any type of material change. And the thing, I mean, I think like soon after, Chris and a few other the organizers were on with like Bernie Sanders and doing a town hall and stuff like that. So as much as Biden meant that unionization shit and going after Amazon as much as he meant, the regime change in Russia, like it's there's nothing that they're going to be able to take a part of. And like, that's the thing is like Chris is not safe enough for them.
Yeah, it's like, and it's with Biden, it's like the Black Lives Matter. It's like everybody's like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. And then they end up assigning more money to the police force or calling for an increase in spending in the security forces. So
James Carr here with a good comment. Not to cut you off, Gene, but this is a good comment. The Democrats don't like Smalls because his union are not part of the recognized professional labor establishment.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the point. I think he's outside.
He's outside of the fatback and biscuits gravy train. Is that the problem?
Yeah, he's self-made. I mean, his union is it's grassroots, right? And if we think back to our discussions last week about labor unions, it's not all nicey, all for the united proletarians of the world when it comes to labor unions. There is a
particularly with labor democracy.
There's a hierarchy within labor. There are established unions that work closely with employers, and then there are elements of the labor force that are quite different. And we're dealing with an industry that is quite new, like the Amazon warehouse logistics industry is a new field. So yeah, he's not from within the existing establishment.
I think one thing that's like it's going to be the toughest challenge, and it's like when they establish the contract, we'll see how effectively they can do this. But it's like stopping the turnover of an Amazon warehouse, where I think they're talking about like they have a turnover like 150% or something like that, which is basically why they're able to keep unions from forming. You don't have the workforce staying there long enough to talk to each other and build up. So I think that's something that is going to have to be, really going to be the fight, is that can they create an atmosphere that actually keeps workers and go from there? Because that's what's really going to be able to show the difference for other warehouses and where they should go. So.
All right. Well, okay. Well, we're going to put a pause on that story for now. We're going to move on to our next subject, which is Elon Musk and Twitter. Buying, not buying, wanting to buy, talking about buying. What do you guys think about this Elon Musk Twitter situation? And what's the latest fracas regarding that as far as the chain of events?
It's pretty funny, right, Pascal? It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny.
Basically, Elon Musk has become a major shareholder in Twitter, and he posited that he wanted to become a member of the board of directors at a certain point, or he was putting out a bid or option to become.
I think he met with them.
I think he
over
did
it.
meet with the board,
Yeah.
and of course, right in the wake of all of the Twitter and the digital spaces are doing the bidding of the liberal deep state establishment because the conservatives don't get treated right. The conservatives are always getting blocked kind of discourse. There are many on the right flank of capital, a lot of conservatives who are like, yeah, Elon's going to buy Twitter and set us free and really get things under control and really stop the libs from being able to censor the reactionary right, which is ironic because for our politics, we know lots of comrades on the left who make the argument that it's actually them that are being censored, and we have evidence of that as well, particularly in the case post-Ukraine invasion, that they're the ones who have been getting the brunt of this. So it seems like there's from both flanks there are people complaining about the way in which the digital non-commons are exercising censorship, and I always find it not to be pedantic, but from a legal perspective, when I hear these people complain that this is censorship, it makes me laugh because you have no constitutional right to speech on a private thoroughfare. You can
That's
only be
true.
censored by a state.
But let me perhaps push back on that a little bit. So, on the legal perspective, I totally agree. And I always do find it quite funny, especially when those on the political right begin crying about not being able to say what they want on a private service, because, of course, they are the ones who believe in free market capitalism. And they're the ones who are like the market decides everything, and the company, you shouldn't be able to demand anything from the company. Twitter owes you nothing, right? They're a business. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. So I do agree that when you see conservatives who are so gung-ho about capitalism whining about censorship by private corporations, it's a bit funny because it exposes the contradictions within their thought. But I think on the left, we have a slightly different position on this, in that the state and the private sector are not sort of these two territories separated by a moat, but they're hand in glove. And the fact that a private company does control what is in effect a kind of digital monopoly that functions because everybody has access to it is problematic if we take a more expansive understanding of what freedom of speech means, what what digital commons are, things that were developed with public money. So I agree with you, Pascal, on a certain level. This is not classic censorship, but the fact that so much of our public square, our public infrastructure is held by private companies, and that we are subject to the despotic power of Silicon Valley to be able to express ourselves in a meaningful way in the public square is problematic. And you said something a long time ago when I first met you, Pascal, which made me think a lot, which was the idea that perhaps we need something like a digital bill of rights if we are going to have.
I advocate that. My position is that I have a problem with the notion of assumptive rights. In other words, atmospheric arguments of how we should have rights based on, oh, well, government funds were started for this and that. If that was the case, then we should all have rights to every corporation because they all get government subsidies. But my position is that I don't disagree that there should be a certain kind of public goods worldview on certain crucial communications, internet space, social media platforms. I totally agree with that. I just don't think that the current particular legal jurisprudential mechanisms we have are designed to protect those rights. And if we had a left or a left flank of capital that was interested or that is interested in those protections, we need to fight for it and put those demands on the table. And I don't see anyone doing that effectively.
Well, I think part of the issue is the whole internet, is something that's been, largely privatized, and like your access to it, the like as far as getting on the internet, the device you utilize to access the internet, whatever you can find, like with that would have to be kind of like like public access to the internet for one, and then some type of space on the internet, in which case, right, everybody gets. And that's the thing though, is like going, I guess where things get kind of murky is like anonymity, of, hey, do you have to like put like Gav's your own social security number or whatever, some
Right.
identifier to say, yeah, I have a right to this one online account, but that's kind of way down the line. But I'm with you though. There needs to be some
I should talk about turning the internet into a public utility.
Yeah, no, and I think the post office should should be transitioned into a communications hub, because like that's all it really was. It's just like the mail was the best they could have. But no, there should be end to end, everybody can have access to, and also that come with a space on the internet, some type of account, in which case you can communicate with other people, sell your trinkets that you made in your basement, whatever.
But can we just note the absolute ridiculous pearl clutching from certain elements of the liberal establishment about Elon Musk is going to take over Twitter? Firstly, who cares, right? It's owned by one load of corporate people. If Elon Musk buys it, that's just another. I mean, he's just a buffoon, right? I mean, he's a very rich buffoon, but whatever. Maybe he'll ban different people. People get banned now for arbitrary and ridiculous reasons. Elon Musk, maybe he will make it more freer. Maybe he'll ban different people, but I don't care. And fundamentally, if you're writing in Jeff Bezos's newspaper complaining about billionaires controlling freedom of speech, or if you're writing for News Corp or working for one of these news channels that is controlled by a giant corporation, you sound like an idiot if you're worrying about freedom of speech being attacked by Elon Musk. The fundamental problem is, of course, that one's ability to speak in the public forum has been historically controlled by those who control the airwaves. With the internet, there's a little bit more openness for different voices to get on. But all this belly aching coming from people who work for I mean, what's the term they use? Established media or legacy media? Legacy media is just shows a complete lack of self-awareness. So on balance, I hope Elon Musk does buy it, simply because I think it will be super funny. But like in terms of practical concerns, I mean, who cares?
It's just a different block of capital that some people don't like.
Yeah,
I think it was the Morning Joe Mika Brzezinski was when she was going on a rant about it, and like Djene, to your point, she literally said Elon Musk is trying to shape people's minds and decide what they think, and that's our job. It's like
what, she actually said that?
She said, someone said, Mickey Brzezinski is a science.
And that's your trigger warning segment for today.
The big new Brzezinski she is.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Actually, Jason did send me a piece for trigger warning, but it was very long, so I didn't know which. But so I guess he'll save it for next week because it was very triggering. But our guest is here.
Excellent. We have the one, the only, Dwayne Monroe, who is a technologist with 20 years of experience with computation, Marxist tech analyst, and intern polemicist on the topic of tech and the tech industry. Let us bring in the one and only Dwayne Monroe.
Welcome, Dwayne. Welcome to the show. Can you hear us?
I'm so used to the applause, but I was like, we don't have that.
Come on, Marcus.
Here with the soundboard.
Can you hear me? My microphone sometimes comes and goes, as fancy as it is. Am I coming through 5x5?
You sound a little foggy.
Roboty.
A little foggy.
A little robotic.
Okay. Now that might be because of the internet. Let me see what I can do.
We'll just do.
You know what? How about now? Let me just do something real quick here.
I gotta say though, the setup, the look, it's
It's
wonderful.
very professional.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very. He's more professional than we are, but he's a tech person.
That was
Yeah,
better.
oh, perfect. You sound perfect.
Fantastic. Okay.
So, Dwayne, I'm kind of excited. I'm not kind of. I'm actually very excited to have you on, Dwayne. You have been a long-time fan of the show.
Indeed.
You've made your support vocal early on. And what was interesting to me is that you're overseas. You're in Europe.
Yeah.
And you are, what country are you in again?
The Netherlands.
You're in the Netherlands.
Indeed,
And
yeah.
I was like, wow, we got this brother who's in the Netherlands who's like a big fan. And I was pretty impressed with that. And I was very happy to see that you had been in contact with Jason to get on the show for this subject matter.
Yeah.
And I got the reading for the show, and frankly, I found the narrative to put it interesting. But as those who watch our show know, I try to start with the basics for our audience and assume people don't know things. And I think you watched enough to know that we do that here. Can you define for our audience what is artificial intelligence, or what is it posited to be?
So let's begin with the definition of artificial intelligence. Oh, by the way, I think I'm hearing myself back, which is a little,
You sound
little
good.
distracting.
Sound good,
Okay.
Doug?
Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm getting like in my audio, I'm actually hearing myself. I wonder. Let's see. Oh, anyway, so in 1956, there was a conference of computer scientists at Dartmouth College, of course, in the United States. And at that conference, John McCarthy, an eminent computer scientist, among others, tried to define what the research program that his collection, or rather his cohort of scientists in computation were trying to accomplish. And so the term that they settled upon was artificial intelligence. In other words, creating machinery, computational machinery, that to some extent, to some greater or lesser extent, would be able to think, perhaps at the level of the fictional computers of Star Trek, which are just, they're good, but they're not as good as us, or perhaps at the level of a droid in Star Wars, which is an actual thinking thing. But it was clearly understood at that time as an aspirational term. But even in the 1950s, when there would be developments such as a technology, or rather a methodology called a perceptron, which was a way of creating a mathematical, how would I put this, a mathematical representation of the crude understanding of the human neuron within the brain. Even at that time, as long ago as that, whenever there was any development, the media and some scientists would get ahead of themselves and say, oh my God, machines can think. So this is like, when rockets were barely hitting orbit, for God's sake. So as early as that, there was this enthusiasm. As the computational capabilities grew, as we were able to do more with computation into the 1960s and 70s, 80s, and so on, the goal was to create machines that could achieve intelligence via the manipulation of symbolic logic. So some film buffs, certainly people are familiar with Stanley Kubrick's work, will know about the movie 2001. And in the name of the computer, the ship's computer, that is really one of the star of the movie when you think about it, HAL 9000, the name is heuristic, algorithmic, logic. And that name represented the aspiration, which was by building a computational system that had a vast array of knowledge available to it, and the ability to work through symbolic logic, we would be able to achieve machine intelligence. Now, of course, that was not accomplished. And so every time there would be enthusiasm, say in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, for a particular method, which in the field is called good old-fashioned AI or GoFi, I'm sorry. There would be, following that wave of enthusiasm, what's called an AI winter, when investment would dry up, interest would dry up, and so forth. In the 2000s, something quite interesting happened. We had game processing units that were not built for this purpose, but it turned out that because they had to handle quite a bit of computation, they were very good at performing very rapidly complex statistical and probabilistic calculations. Silicon Valley rushed into this space and then began pouring the billions that they have at their disposal into maximizing the machine learning, which is really statistics, and the creation of large language models. So for example, when you use Siri or Alexa, what they've done is they've created a method of vectorizing, that is to say, of mathematizing audio input, and then having a sort of a library of responses to that. That because of the processing power, it seems, unless you stretch it a little bit beyond its limits, it can seem as if, oh my God, we finally have achieved that. Oh, Gene telling me that my sound's going a little fuzzy.
It's a little fuzzy. Not too bad.
Okay. Let me just ask something while we do that. So, in essence, what you're saying, a lot of the stuff that we talk about as AI is a very advanced ability for a computer to deal with statistics and probability and calculate things based on that. There's no intelligence in the sense that we think of it in human terms. It's just very complex algorithms that look at statistical data to work out what the best response is in any given circumstance. So it's not like go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, even that description gives the technology too much credit. So to give you a visualization of what machine learning really works out to be in practice, let's say that you have been using your bank debit card in a variety of places, and then you go to a different place and the bank flags your card. You can't use it. Well, what's happened, of course, is that the system has built a table, it's almost like a spreadsheet, of geolocations of where you've used your bank card. And then from that, using statistical methods that have existed for decades, maybe generations, it says, well, here's the mean and the median, and we'll perform a linear regression against where you've been and what you've done with your card. This is outside of that range, so I flag it. So there's not even any math going on. In fact, these machine learning platforms are quite bad at math. Boolean systems, simple computer systems, are far better at performing mathematics than these machine learning systems. They're really very good at statistical pattern matching. And within that bounded space, they can do quite a bit, but the space is quite bounded. And what Silicon Valley is attempting to do is give us the impression that these bounded systems are either already or on the road to being superior to us. And of course, it's nonsense, but this is the propaganda, as I call it, that they've been spewing.
And I think what part of the point that you're making too is that it's like there's no thought here. Everything is a preloaded decision. So if I had to go to a library of decisions I could make every time some type of issue came up, it's all depending on the speed that I can go to the library and say, I'm in the street, I'm looking at a car, do I walk? Yes or no? No, but if depending on how long that takes, I could be in the street by the time I make the decision. But if it doesn't, if I do it really quick, it could assume that, or people could assume that I'm actually thinking. But that's kind of where it's at. Is that at best it's just really fast of finding what that preloaded decision is,
or path dependencies. Now, by the way, I'm being told that my audio is still a little squirrely, so I don't want to talk and then people can't hear what I'm saying. How do I sound now?
We can hear it was a little crackly in the voice.
That's very frustrating.
it's like the computers don't want you to say what you're saying.
Yeah. The AI is turning against you, Dwayne.
How dare you? Oh my God.
But we're dealing basically with a system that is being sold to the public as this magical intelligent system, where in fact it's not really a qualitative change from earlier systems. It's just that we have more computing power through
Precisely.
we have more computing power. We have more data input. The internet allows you to like collect data and things like that, which allows you to do all kinds of things. But as I know very well, my Alexa is still really stupid and doesn't like do things properly. But this is the second part of your argument, though, of course. So
yeah,
we've got this story of AI, okay? And sure, there's probably a desire for people who work in the field of AI to like inflate their claims in order to get a slice of investment money, to get government money and get grants. But the other part is there is a logic of capitalism here, specifically in the claims that AI is superior to, for example, what a human can do. Can you like elaborate on what that is? Because there's a lot of talk nowadays about automation. We've obviously one of the long-term trends within capitalism is the transformation of humanity into appendages of machinery, and of course, during the early phases of the Industrial Revolution, that process was primarily physical labor, where the muscle power of animals and humans was converted into steam, electric, things like that. But of course, with the internet revolution, we're seeing what we might call white collar jobs increasingly getting taken away and being handed over to computer systems. I hear now, for example, it's difficult to get a job as a paralegal. There are, many jobs are being made redundant, or at least there are attempts to make redundant white-collar intellectual jobs through AI and machinery. Why do you think? So, what's the logic behind this? And can this so-called AI really take over these jobs? What's the social and economic impetus behind all of this?
The short answer is no. They cannot take over these jobs. However, and this is why I do what I do in terms of doing polemics on this topic for the left, because I think it's very important for us to focus our analytical efforts and our resistance efforts against the right target. The wrong target is believing that the paralegals can be eliminated by software. The right target is understanding that the way that those jobs are eliminated is by degrading the quality of the job offered to fit within the narrow parameters of this primitive, and I say primitive on purpose, this primitive technology, right? So for example, self-driving cars, or allegedly self-driving cars, they do not work as advertised. Everyone knows about the failures of Tesla with its full self-driving technology. But even companies that have done better, such as Waymo or Cruise, what they're hiding from you is that behind the scenes, there is an army of people, like an emission control, observing these vehicles. And it's not just because they're moving towards some point at which that will no longer be necessary. It's because outside of very, very narrow parameters, and note that I say this over and over again, outside of this bounded space, they cannot operate. But the presentation of the idea that, well, you can be replaced is, I'm arguing, the target. I think the technologists know that this stuff doesn't work, but they're trying to weaken your mind space by saying it does. And it works just well enough. And if you watch the videos, the PR videos, just well enough, that you could be bamboozled into thinking that, my God, I'm a trucker, I'm about to lose my job, and you are not.
Let me interject. I think I have a good way of you really brought something to my mind of explaining what you're talking about. We remember when we had regular taxi drivers, and everyone was saying that Uber and Lyft were going to make taxis obsolete, which they did. But there's technically nothing different between what a taxi does and what an Uber does.
Precisely.
And I think too is that the promise for Uber initially was AI.
Yes.
Like the app and ordering someone basically a app-based taxi service. That was only the bridge to what was coming very soon. And
precisely
that was
a value
spelling out here
to investors, right?
And and I think what's important, and sorry, Djene, is just that when labor organizing, when for the trucker, for the Uber driver, you are more important than society is allowing, I guess, with all this AI on the forefront. It's like, no, truckers are actually more important than what's being deemed here.
Yes, and the fact that they are more important gives the impetus for these companies to redouble, to triple their efforts to fool you into thinking that they're not needed. And this is why I say to leftists to focus.
Oh, let Dwayne finish. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Sorry.
Yeah, and this is why when I started what I do, when I began to note that leftists, when they would critique the tech industry, assumed that what companies were saying was true, and then built their critique on those PR statements rather than asking, is this even possible? And if it's not possible, and assuming that my adversary knows it's not possible, why are they saying it? That's the question.
It's fascinating. I have a very good friend of mine who I respect, who he's been so turned off by the normal. He was normally a very smart news junkie. Always was politics, what was going on in the world. With the rise of Trump and a variety of other things, he became very turned off by news. He also invests in the market. And he's like, the only thing that matters now is the new coming technology. So he's always like, that's why I'm investing all of my energy in monitoring is the coming technology. So he goes into this long, 1 hour spiel with me about there are going to be these 8 technologies to watch that will dictate the future. I don't have all, but he says blockchain, machine learning, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, digital money. There's a couple more I forget, but I'm sure you know what all 8 of them are. I'm sure you've heard of them before.
Yes.
Can you explain to me if he's being led down the President Monroe's path, and if he is, why? And can you talk to us about these quote-unquote 8 technologies and what this means? And who's pitching this?
Of the ones you've mentioned, I think that we've already touched on why AI, which we should always put in quotes, is a false promise. As far as blockchain is concerned, that is a database technology. It is a distributed ledger. It is a method for distributing the status of a token in the case of a cryptocurrency, which means cryptologically secured. And it's not even currency. It's an instrument. It's a gambling instrument, essentially. The idea is that this database would somehow change the world. It is a database. Is a methodology for a database. It will not change anything. Machine learning is a subcategory of the parent category of AI. Machine learning is useful. The problem, and this is a common theme with capitalism, right? Like airplanes are useful, but the aircraft industry, as currently structured, is destructive, right? So in a post-capitalist world, we could still have aircraft. We just wouldn't have aircraft that would be used to fly you to a stupid meeting in a conference room in Milan and burn all that fuel. We would be smarter about it, right? So with machine learning, we might use it for as I think I described when talking to Varn, a super cyber sin, right? Like something like that. Statistical analysis is useful. It could be used just like Walmart's methods are useful. Some of Amazon's methods are, technologically speaking, are useful. But when used for capitalist purposes, of course, they are destructive. I forgot what the other item that you mentioned, Pascal.
AI, machine learning,
Yeah,
blockchain, cryptocurrency, digital currency.
Cryptocurrency, of course, we can just sum that up as a Ponzi scheme, and it's like Amway on steroids, essentially. And as I tell to people who get enthusiastic about this, ask yourself why Goldman Sachs, Matt Damon, and various other villains are trying to get you to invest. They don't give a flying fig about you, right? Especially, well, Matt Damon doesn't care either. But Goldman Sachs, of course, is essentially the accounting department for Mephistopheles. So why are they trying to get you to participate? Obviously, to scam you, because they need a greater fool to plug into that system, because you have to convert the crypto into actual currency. Digital currency does have some potential uses, and I think Janet Yellen has written about this, because it's simply a way of making fiat currency, to modernizing our usage of fiat currency. So we can certainly see some potential uses for that.
Can you define the parameters of digital currency?
I think that's still being defined. Here in Europe, for example, I know that the European Central Bank has done some work in this area. So the idea, and I'll give you an example. So here in the Netherlands, I rarely have to use cash. And the methods that I use to use my card, my debit card, are far more secure than what I experienced in the States. There are like triple layers of security, which obviously doesn't mean you can't be hacked, but it's harder. It's harder to do. So what they're imagining is a methodology of extending fiat currency, actual currencies, the euro, the dollar, the yen, so forth, in a way that takes advantage of the networking effects of computation, but obviously is directly tied to our understanding of currency as something that you can actually use as an asset, and as a method of transaction, and as a means of currency, of all the things that actual currencies do.
So is there going to be a major difference? And that's what you talk about. It's like, is there going to be a major difference from
ATM card in more different places? I mean, pretty much. I mean,
yeah, I guess, yeah. Is there a difference from, hey, I can use my phone and just hold it to the meter, instead of having
that's
to
part
pull
of
out
it.
my card
That
or
certainly
cash,
is
right?
part of the vision. But I think that what Yellen is working towards, because this is still information, I think that what Yellen, and I do give her credit as a technocrat in this area, because I think that her ideas are actually quite interesting and could certainly be used by even for non-capitalist purposes. And what the European Central Bank is beginning to work on is imagining and engineering methodologies that would extend, as I said, our current understanding of currency in a way that takes advantage of digital methodologies. And part of that certainly would be a greater velocity of movement, as we experience electronically, but in a way that is not tied to the speculative nature of crypto.
So basically, What you're kind of telling us then is perhaps we already know this deep down, but we're totally being lied to by the tech sector. The
Yeah.
AI stuff is basically just it's a mechanical Turk in the literal
Yes.
sense. People
Yes.
who don't know what a mechanical Turk is, it was a machine presented to the Empress of Austria in the late 18th century, and she was told that this machine would play a good game of chess. Really, it was a thing that looked like a machine with a dude inside playing chess. That's what AI. That's what these cars are. These self-driving cars are not self-driving. There's like a whole mission control. And when it comes to cryptocurrency, this is all just Tupperware for bros, right?
Yes.
NFTs.
That's what it is. Only at least with Tupperware, you could put your food in the Tupperware and put it in the fridge.
There's
With
a real value.
crypto, you are left with quite literally nothing.
And that's it. Going to like a digital currency, and this is where I'm going to go back to the post office again because it's one of the few U.S. institutions that are worth even talking about in a positive light. But this is where you talk about postal banking, where any type of, I guess, digital currency would actually make that exceptionally easy. As long as the physical infrastructure is in place. Because really, it's like you don't necessarily need these different banks with all these. Oh, you get this percentage rate and all that stuff. Most people just need a place to house their money until they buy things.
Yes.
And making that more available, it could be, I think, should be the use of technology, but that's not
Absolutely.
exactly what's going
Absolutely.
on.
I mean, and one of the things that I say about this technology, and I think Pascal, you were touching on this before I joined. Computation should be a public good. That's how it should be understood. And on my blog, I wrote an article, "Public Cloud as a Public Good," in which I spell out an idea for replacing, well, initially running alongside, but eventually replacing the private control of computation, which should be considered a key resource of a complex society. For example, imagine if instead of wasting billions of dollars building large language models such as GPT-3 that answer questions sloppily based upon the data that it drew from Wikipedia and Twitter and God knows where else. In other words, instead of doing an elaborate, expensive, power-consuming mechanical Turk operation, you distributed computation to the community to actually solve problems, right? And so one of the reasons why I'm so keen about this is that we are watching a key resource that should be used for our purposes burned up for short-term gain. 20 years from now, who knows if we'll be able to construct more computation? We don't know. We don't know what our situation will be like, particularly since climate change is obviously, as the IPCC most recent report indicated, the situation is far more dire than most of us are, I think, really comfortable with admitting, right? I mean, they're talking about an unlivable planet for human beings. So the situation is critical, and computation should play a role. Community, public goods computation should play a key role in helping us understand and achieve public goods command and control of data, and not just the data in the sense of I browsed and Google knows about that. All right, I that's not good, but I think we're past the point in which that's our primary concern. Our primary concern is these data centers should belong to us. They should not belong to these companies. This is really ultimately what I'm saying. Or we should build our own data centers to work around that problem. Now, obviously, we don't have that power. I'm not foolish, but that's really what needs to be called for.
Well, wait, let me ask you a question then. If this impending technological boom is bupkis, why is there an increase in labor precarity? why are we seeing people saying that their labor is being degraded, or that salaries are going down, or that the kind of works that are available are poor or are lower quality? Is it because we're being pushed into these technological replacements for existing jobs that are just degrading labor? Is there some phenomenon going on here? Can you explain
I
it?
think that one of your earlier guests, Aaron Benenov, I believe he has hit the nail on the head about that, which is that it's not automation. It's that capitalism is quite literally out of ideas. It has reached in an ideological dead end. It has reached a innovation dead end, and so there aren't enough interesting jobs under the current scheme. I'm not saying that there would be no interesting jobs if we were to be liberated, but under the current scheme that we find ourselves living in, there are not enough interesting jobs, or rather, those jobs are not being created because capitalists have no interest in creating those jobs. Now they're pretending that it's because they have automated these jobs away, but an analysis of the actual material of computation reveals that to be false. And so I think that Dr. Benanov's, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, I believe that his work is the definitive analysis of how automation has been used. The term automation has been used from propaganda purposes to explain what really is a true, and I think all of us have lived long enough to actually see a true crisis of capitalism. And I don't know if it's the terminal one, but I will tell you, working in the tech industry, that I encounter people who are half my age who will say to me, well, it must be so confusing to you to be surrounded by all this brand new, amazing technology. And I say to them, two things. Number one, I have forgotten more, as the old heads say, than you'll ever know. But number two, no, I have literally watched only the increase of hardware capacity, but I have not watched an elaborately brand new techno infrastructure. We think that this is the creme de la creme, but this is just the culmination of research that was done decades ago, and just wrapped up in a way and been presented to us by Jobs as if it was from the future. But most of the work was done by the government and for the Defense Department and so forth. So I have not seen any genuinely new ideas. This is not to say that there are no new ideas. It's that these ideas are not profitable. And so they don't get any traction. I'll say this and I'll be quiet. Within the field of AI, this is actually well understood. And there are individuals like Gary Marcus, for example, who's a cognitive scientist and a computer scientist, who realize that this is a problem, that the field is being held back by the wealth, the power, and the narrow interests of the majors, of the Googles, the Microsofts, the Amazons. Their interests are OPI. Their interests are only to do certain things with certain technical stacks that increase their power and not allow anything else. And they are sapping up all the talent. On Twitter, I've watched people go through that meat grinder, and they're young and they're enthusiastic and they think, oh, I'm building the future. And I've literally observed them over years become disillusioned as they realize, those who have like a strong moral conscience, mostly women, I must say, because men are typically just absolute idiots. But to reach the conclusion, wow, this is not good. This is not good at all. I have to get out of this because they're not building the future that they thought they were.
Are you saying capitalism is now a fetter on development
Yes.
of the productive forces?
I think this is something that even Marx perhaps did not anticipate, because I believe that Marx's hope, his vision at least, was that through the increase of technological capacity, that workers would build the superstructure essentially that would allow them, to build a communist
more
society.
leisure time.
Yeah. But that is not the case. We cannot have, and this is not a popular point of view, we cannot have fully automated luxury capitalism. We cannot, because the technology does not support it. Even what the capitalists have done does not support that, which is fine, because we would have decision aids and we would have machines that would be quite nice, and we still would have to work.
No, I think
a lot less. Work a lot less.
Absolutely.
This is, I think this is really important. I think you're hitting on some. I mean, Cooper and I have discussed this before. The mythology behind Silicon Valley is that the market decides what is the best and most useful application of technology. And of course, if I'm a graduate from Stanford, what am I going to take a job on? Some kind of new field that is not profitable but might benefit humanity, or the next sex app? That's where it goes. Because if I'm an investor, I'm going to go and I'm going to try and do something that will make me as much money quickly. And we see this, I think, not just in technology, but just take a look at media, for example. As Disney monopolizes the movie industry, we just get remakes of the old movie industry. And to a final point, and something I think you, which I find really interesting, that you said is when the young kids are like, look at all this technology, do you feel confused? Viewed from another perspective, would you say that we haven't really seen any major breakthroughs for like 30 years? We've seen better iterations of things and the application of old technologies to sort of the mass market, but no major breakthroughs. And B, do you think the question now is less, it's not even that we need more technological innovation, but we need the distribution of the benefits of that technological innovation that already exists to the majority of the population? To use an analogy, if we stopped medical innovation tomorrow and just focused in distributing the medical technologies that we have today to the global population, we'd probably do a lot more good than coming up with
Years ago, I read a science fiction short story in which some aliens, the typical thing, aliens come to Earth, they have all this amazing technology, everybody's like, oh my God, look at your technology. And there's a moment in the book when one of the extraterrestrials, no doubt expressing the author's point of view, says, the interstellar travel and all that, it's all cool. But you, even at your current level of technology, have everything you need to provide for the people of your planet. And you're not doing it for capitalist reasons. I mean, it's pretty explicit. I forget the name of the short story, but it really stuck in my mind. That by like 1965 or something, you probably had a lot of what you needed, or to make the Earth, if not a paradise, certainly better, much better. And how much more so now, right? So yes, the problem is distribution. And this gets me back to what I was saying about the use of computation, which is that, to use an example, OpenAI recently, which is a artificial intelligence research organization, as the name implies. It's not open and it's not doing AI, but it's called OpenAI. Anyway, they're very well funded and yada yada. So they recently released yet another gigantic language model, like hundreds of billions of parameters, and you can type in. It's called DALL-E. You can type in a description of something, and it'll produce a plausible and sometimes quite nice looking visual, like a rabbit holding a Coca-Cola, sitting on a park bench. That's an example that was shared on Twitter over and over again. And there are people in the field who are very excited, like, oh my God, this is such a breakthrough. But of course, the question is, yes, that's nice, and you pulled some amazing mathematical sleight of hand to make this happen. And you needed a tremendous amount of computational power. The use of computational power for that is an absolute waste. It helps no one. And all that OpenAI wants to do is to create a what's called an application programming interface, or API, which is a way for people to plug their code into what they've built to do who knows what. Maybe a magazine says we don't need to hire an artist. We can just type in a description of something, and then we'll get something that is good enough for the magazine. That helps no one. And that's an example of how capitalism is pouring crazy amounts of resources into creating systems to reduce their labor costs. What would happen if that computational power was, again, as we were saying, for our needs? Because how many computers, how many game processing units, how much storage, how large a data center or data centers are committed to this utterly stupid use of computation, that on Twitter, the AI bros are jumping all over themselves to celebrate and argue about, is it the path to machine intelligence? And they're all just yanking each other off over this. And it's really madness.
Reminds me of the Boston Dynamic videos.
Yes.
Where like they've got these, robots that I gotta assume was just years and years and years of developing and tweaking and all these
the
things.
The Atlas.
Yeah,
robot.
it could do a backflip and cartwheel and and all those things. And all I'm thinking in my head is like, that's the thing that's gonna be murdering me later on. My
but it's not. It's not. And I'll tell you why. I actually wrote, and not to keep plugging my blog, but I got so tired of people on Twitter saying Terminator, Skynet, robot overlords, whenever they see these stupid videos. I mean, all right, let me be fair. I'm getting a little hyped. The videos are not stupid. However, the use to which Boston Dynamics is putting the videos is stupid. Because it is indeed propaganda. Behind the scenes, because I actually found the presentation video of the head of engineering for Boston Dynamics, who explained step by step how they produced those videos. And it was fascinating to me because what he revealed, because engineers, when they talk to each other, they have to tell the truth. They can't bullshit each other. So in that engineering focused video, he showed how they do offline training in which you do a simulation of the motions of Atlas, and then online usage in which, once again, a contained space, this robot performs these functions. And then, of course, it's interesting. But what it is an interesting demonstration of control over a machine in motion. It is not at all a demonstration of machine intelligence, because that thing has no intelligence, just as the Boston Dynamics Spot has no intelligence. You probably saw the recent video of the brilliant Eric Adams walking with a Spot in New York with a controller. Now, usually Boston Dynamics hides the controller. They just show you this video of the Spot dog walking, and then to give you the impression that, oh my God, this is autonomous Black Mirror thing. But no, it's a drone. It's a remote controlled device, and it will always be a remote controlled device. It has some very crude autonomous capabilities, like any toy does. Just walk straight, turn left, turn right.
So basically, what you're telling us, Marcus is going to be killed by one of those things being piloted.
Yes.
By
that's the point.
A black woman in a control center somewhere in Eric Adams's basement.
They're trying to do racism, sexism.
Yeah, a
And
double
the
rate.
misogynoir.
Well, no, because it'll be affirmative action employment. No,
Yes.
you know, maybe
Wow.
we'll have a Latino person doing it.
You're probably right. Yeah.
Way to kick off the advertisement for Sublation Media, Djene.
I don't know why she has to be a woman and she has to be black. But if you follow the CIA script, yes, it would be a diverse.
I can't help but think about that CIA thing where they had the woman who was. Did she have like some kind of stress issue?
Yeah,
something like
there was
that,
something. I suffer from anxiety.
She's
She's disability diverse too. She's not only
She's-
ethnically diverse, gender diverse. She's disability diverse too.
Yep, you got to hit all.
Anyway,
the
Dwayne,
points.
I want to ask you a last question, and we're going to wrap
Yeah.
up because we're going to go too long. Is that I want you to break down to the very last compound, the phenomenon. I know you can. NFTs.
Mm.
What is this hustle? Please define. Please explain. Please debunk. Please.
Non-fungible token is what the term NFT stands for. Essentially, what it is an image stored on a server, and you supposedly own, in some amorphous way, this image stored on a server. And in fact, let me correct myself. It's a pointer to an image on a server that you allegedly own. And the idea is that using the blockchain, you'll be able to, exchange, to sell, to make money. And indeed, some people have made money. However, those days are over because, like all pyramid schemes, those who get in early make the money and everyone else is a sucker. And so some of the stories you may have heard are of people saying, oh my God, my NFT of a monkey doing a backflip while drinking a milkshake was stolen, or somebody right-clicked and downloaded this image or did a screen capture of my image. How dare you? This is my property. And it's like, no, you absolute, total, and complete idiot. You don't own anything. It's not a Caravaggio in a museum in Rome. It is an image of a monkey backflipping, drinking a milkshake.
Can I just ask for clarification when you say it's on a server, right?
Yes.
So there, it's on a save disk for us old people.
Yeah.
And
somewhere
somewhere
within the
there's
chain.
There's one copy of it, and you're the only person, and you pay for the password to be able to remotely access that one copy that exists.
No, I was about to say nay, as in Dutch, because I've been speaking Dutch. No, it's not even as secure as that. So what, say, an exchange such as Coinbase or an NFT exchange would say is, okay, so you've created these, you've added them to a chain, and you are the holder, and you can attempt to sell them or trade them or whatever you're going to do, and they exist on a blockchain. There's not one blockchain. There are multiple chains. Ethereum is one, and others. And so what you have is a reference that points to the location of that image within the chain. So you never actually have possession, not even in the way that you have, say, a kind of digital possession of a picture of your wife that might be on your hard drive. So because even though that's all digital, there is kind of a direct relationship there that you have to the actual electronic artifact.
Storage. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, within storage. But no, this is actually within the chain, which means it's also liable to manipulation, to theft of various types. And the idea is that artists, could make money by putting their images out, and then people would love it, and then they would use crypto, to exchange for it, and then you could convert that crypto into actual currency, and this would give artists freedom from what is, of course, a terrible art market. But of course, it hasn't worked out that way. In the same way that Tupperware or Amway did not turn middle-class people into millionaires or billionaires, except for the person who convinced everyone in the neighborhood to sign up.
There you go. Well, on that note, I think that Dwayne, we really enjoyed you being on here. We might have you. You might become the This Is Revolution tech correspondent. We might have to make a spot for you, a straight leftist,
Listen,
a dialectical imperialist tech guy.
my role, I see, because I've been in the data centers. I know, I mean, no one knows everything, but I have a direct link to computation. Like, it's not theoretical, it's not academic. I have built systems at scale, and I continue to work in this field. So I'm much harder to fool. And also because I know what corporations are doing, because when you work with computation within corporate spaces, you are at the center of power. And this is what I tell my sisters and brothers who work in this space, who are very modest and say, oh, we don't know what companies do. No, you know better than almost anyone else what these companies are doing. You know, you just have to liberate your mind to actually say, how do I turn my technical knowledge into a knowledge of what corporations are doing with the technology?
You're like a wizard. You're like a
I
wizard.
feel like, Dwayne, we need you to start
We're gonna
start
call him Wizard
organizing
Dwayne.
the tech revolution. You
Yeah,
know, like
you
everybody's
might be
gonna
our new
unplug.
tech correspondent for This Is Revolution. Yeah.
I'd love to.
This is
I'd love
this
to.
is this is the problem. I think, is that we are being bamboozled with this tech language because we don't have the keys to the language, and you don't even need to have like a super deep knowledge of the technology to understand whether it's a fraud or not. But you're being told that, oh, there's all these things you just don't understand, where in fact, like, it doesn't take much as long as someone like Dwayne explains it to you to realize these what's his name, NFTs are fraud, blockchain is a scam, and all this AI stuff is a freaking mechanical Turk. And but we're being taken by we're building a culture that worships the tech people as if they are wizards.
Exactly.
They're not wizards.
Exactly. They're not.
They're not.
Exactly. Yeah.
We didn't really touch on it, but it's like, I think it's the same phenomenon that you're pointing out, is like this fake belief that AI even can exist. You know, translates to the climate crisis, and believing that there is going to be some tech wizard who's going to figure out the Earth saving button and press it, and then we'll all be going back to like
even the movie Don't Look Up, which is allegedly a satire of these people. At the end of that movie, what did we have? We had this Musk-like character somehow building an interstellar spacecraft. Now, yes, they do get to a planet and get murdered by aliens, and that's supposed to be the denouement. It's supposed to be like the funny bit. But watching that, I'm thinking, no, that idiot would not have been able to build an interstellar spacecraft. That's the point.
Yeah.
Right. Well, people should definitely check you out on Vonblog as well. You did an interview on Vonblog. Have you been anywhere else?
Yes, I was on Doug's show. I was on
Dwayne's show too.
Actually interviewed by a podcaster in Norway and one in Sweden.
All right. Well, thank you for your support of This Is Revolution podcast. Keep in contact with us. Keep following us on Twitter. And that's your Twitter handle right there. And thank you so much, Dwayne. We appreciate your input. And we will be trying to invite you back again to talk about these new technological scams, hustles, and developments as they come about.
Yep. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
No
and so, just one more thing. If you're interested, we're going to be on the Sublimation Media Twitch talking about the movie Red Dawn in 20 minutes. With that,
oh damn, which one?
The original. Nobody watched that.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I would like to thank everyone for coming out to our Saturday free show for This Is Revolution podcast. On behalf of myself, Pascal Robert, and Jason Miles, the main host, and the This Is Revolution podcast team, I hope you guys have a happy and wonderful Easter weekend. And come see us Tuesday, where we have Professor Mugabe, who's going to be talking about Booker T. Washington and sociology. And we have another full week, 2 weeks more of this month. I'm fasting for Ramadan. And then we'll see you for May. We have a whole new month of great shows coming on. And check out Jason's video essay. As a matter of fact, it's still doing well. It's very interesting. He's talking about capitalism. And besides that, that's about all. And we are out.